85% of marine litter is plastic, and there are approximately 5 trillion pieces of plastic in our oceans.
Maybe a plastic bag is dropped on a sidewalk, flies into a river, and ends up at sea. Maybe garbage is flushed down a toilet, passes through a sewage system, and ends up in the ocean. Maybe plastic flies off a garbage barge and ends up in the water. Maybe storms wash trash out to sea. No matter how it arrives, 11% of the world's plastic waste ends up at sea, which is a lot, given that 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic has been produced since the 1950s.
There are many global environmental issues associated with plastic production, consumption, and disposal. Many of these are tied to greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming. There are various governance structures and strategies being attempted to alleviate these issues and possible improvements. Today, however, we'll be focusing on one aspect.
Marine plastic pollution hurts ocean species. Many species mistake plastic for prey and ingest it, filling their stomachs and eventually dying from starvation. They also suffer from lacerations and infections and face reductions in swimming ability. Floating pieces of plastic debris also serve as rafts, facilitating the transport of invasive species which hurt ecosystems. This matters for a few reasons. For one thing, many people view wildlife and ecosystems as having inherent value, meaning that anything that hurts them is seen as a problem. It also matters for health reasons. Recent studies have found plastics in 25% of seafood sold around the world. Human ingestion of microplastics via food is linked to several different health problems, including impaired immune system functioning.
Marine plastic pollution, via its effects on wildlife, also undermines ecosystem services. These include food production, coastal storm protection, water purification, and recreation. Plastic pollution also affects the provision of all of these via the interconnectedness of our ocean ecosystems.
According to UNEP, marine plastic pollution does approximately $8 billion of damage to the global economy each year.
Governance of marine plastic pollution is part of high seas governance, which, as we have seen in class, via examples such as whaling and IUU fishing, is a particularly challenging sphere of global governance. The high seas are a global commons, and enforcement of regulations is challenging given complex legal frameworks and the sheer logistical difficulties of monitoring such vast spaces. Add to the fact that the working to combat marine plastic pollution involves targeting land-based point sources, and you have an extremely challenging global governance issue.
There are, however, some existing governance structures related to marine plastic pollution. The 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea established legal frameworks to govern ocean-related activities. While some theorists have suggested that pieces of the treaty could be activated to address plastic pollution, that was not its original intent, making its application challenging. International marine plastic governance actually dates back further, to the 1972 Convention on the Prevention of Marine Pollution by Dumping of Waste and Other Matter, aka the London Dumping Convention. However, the convention and its successor, the 1996 London Protocol, are focused on industrial waste and larger physical structures and not single-use plastics, making them less effective for this issue.
More recently, the 2017 UN Environmental Assembly meeting in Nairobi discussed the problem of ocean plastic pollution, among other issues. The meeting began development of a binding legal instrument for combating ocean plastic pollution. The most recent draft of the protocol was discussed just 2 weeks ago at the negotiating committee's fourth meeting in Ottawa.
As with other environmental issues, there are many challenges in governing marine plastic pollution. International institutions and multilateral agreements play an important role, but rules are often fragmented across organizations and forums with different frameworks and approaches.
Because of the global nature of marine plastic pollution, it would benefit from globally coordinated action, but in its current state, governance is plagued with fragmentation. The International Marine Organization, the Honolulu Strategy, the Global Partnership on Plastic Pollution and Marine Litter, the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity, and of course UNEP, with many agreements and programs within it, are just a few examples of the many institutions and agreements that lay out rules, regulations, and recommendations for combating marine plastic pollution.
These agreements are non-binding, often overlapping, and non-hierarchical. Many experts support the creation of a central, binding agreement, and discussions regarding an integrated global approach are ongoing in the UN, but progress has been limited. It is difficult to govern in an arena like the high seas where the effects of plastic pollution are prevalent, yet jurisdiction is often unclear. Whose job is it to save these parts of the ocean?
Most states don't know or don't care enough, and this is just one of the reasons why governance has been so hard. For many, it is out of sight, out of mind. This is a problem for a lot of ocean governance, including plastic pollution, fishery stock depletion, coral reef bleaching, and other issues. but this doesn't mean that the threats to global well-being are any less real.
This is a challenge. There is a lack of uniform definitions and categories of plastic debris and global inconsistencies in monitoring methods. While some large floating plastic debris can be seen from space, it is very difficult to monitor and measure microplastics. It's hard and super resource intensive to keep track of and hold governments, corporations, and people accountable.
We mentioned the many problems that ocean plastic cause for humans, animals, and ecosystems. However, the burden of these impacts are often inequitably experienced by marginalized communities. Some policies, like the global plastic waste trade and privatization of plastic waste governance, have exacerbated these inequalities.
The current governance system is filled with problems and challenges. It's a tough problem to tackle, but that doesn't mean there aren't ways to try and solve it. We shouldn't and can't just give up. Let's start with you, the individual. Individual actions wield significant power. Every person can contribute by adopting simple yet impactful habits. Start by reducing plastic usage in daily life by choosing reusable alternatives.
Participate in beach cleanup efforts and support organizations dedicated to ocean conservation. Educate yourself and others about the issue, and advocate for policies that promote sustainable practices, even if it's just in your local community. What you do is contagious, and you may be surprised how many people follow your lead.
Next, how can we approach the issue on a governmental level? First, governments need to make sure they participate in international institutions and ratify and implement some of the important agreements that we've mentioned.
They must be active participants in international meetings and advocate for new legislation. They need to agree to and implement and enforce policies like the UN Global Plastics Treaty.
The logistics of this treaty are in the works, and we are inching closer to a central agreement that has the potential to deter much of the globe's plastic pollution as a legally binding collective agreement within the UN.
It would curb plastic pollution globally, but as we saw from a meeting earlier in April, some countries like the US are not willing to do so. As individuals, we must call for our countries to support this ban.
Lastly, new advanced technology has proven to be a powerful ally in the attempts to solve this problem, and the technology keeps improving. Innovative solutions like autonomous drones equipped with sensors can help monitor and map plastic waste throughout the ocean, aiding in targeted cleanup efforts. Underwater drones have also been developed to detect microplastics in the water, which was previously very hard to do efficiently.
Or things like the Bubble Curtain Project, a bubble barrier that can catch plastics from 1 millimeter into 1 meter in size, or the application of enzymes and fungus to break down plastics for reuse.
Most importantly, we need a change in the way our global industry functions. There are only so many ways we can try and clean up plastics. We need to start at the root of the problem, a sustainable shift from using and producing plastic products.
Although an arduous task, together through individual choices, collective and governmental action, and the innovative application of technology, we can turn the tide on ocean plastic pollution and safeguard our oceans and all the services they provide for generations to come.